Hi, I'm Jess, part-time hobbit, and I'm here to talk to you about, well, something Tolkien adjacent. So this may not be Tolkien specific, but I feel like it's a pretty safe bet to say that if you're here, you also think cloaks are pretty neat. Now, cloaks can be as simple as a blanket wrapped around your shoulders, or they can be a $500 handmade piece of art. But I think we can find a happy medium here. This should be simple enough for people of all sewing skill levels, from a total novice to a battle-hardened expert, but if you are confused at all, feel free to ask questions in the comments below and I'll answer them as soon as I get the chance. This project took me 30 minutes, but I've also been sewing for a while, so especially if this is your first time working with fabric, make sure you take your time. For this project, you'll need a blanket that's at least 60 by 80 inches. I'm using a thrifted wool blanket that was $25. Although you can find some good options on Amazon, I would really recommend that you look around your house for options or go to a secondhand shop rather than buying new. When it comes to outerwear in general, wool is kind of like a super material. It can hold up to 30% of its own weight in water before it starts to actually feel wet, and it's one of the only materials that can still retain heat even when it's wet. I highly recommend you look for a blanket with at least some wool content, but if you can't find that, just make sure you avoid anything that's woven, like cotton or linen, that will be prone to fraying if the edges are left unfinished. You'll also need a soft measuring tape, or a piece of ribbon, paper, or string and a ruler. Then you'll need thread, preferably something that matches your blanket, and a sharp pair of scissors. To begin with, lay your blanket out flat on the floor. You can't quite see the edges of mine in this shot, but in my defense, I had my phone taped to the ceiling, so it's not like I could have gotten my camera much higher up. I also looked like a gremlin the day I filmed this part. I will not be apologizing for this. Let's measure out the section that'll become the hood. I'm making mine 14 inches deep, which was plenty for me, but you could add a few more inches if you want to look extra mysterious. Measure your 14 inches in on the top and bottom of the blanket, and fold that over so you have a 14-inch panel going all the way down. I'm just going to hold this gently in place with one hand while I neatly cut down the fold line. You should now have a 14-inch by at least 60-inch panel. Take that panel and fold 22 inches down over itself. You want the overall length of this strip to be 44 inches, so cut across the bottom where the edge of your fabric sits. Now we need to determine the size of our neck hole. Take your soft tape measure and wrap it snugly around the base of your neck. Then loosen it by a few inches, giving yourself enough slack that you won't be choked. For me, that was 20 inches. If you're using a ribbon or string, simply snip that off the desired length and then measure that string with a ruler. Take half of whatever measurement you just got and mark it out on the bottom raw edge of the hood. I'm going to make a small snip with my scissors so that I can see it. Make a line from the mark you just made to the top folded corner and cut across, or freehand it like me if you feel like gambling with fate. Hold on to your neck hole measurement for later. Next comes a bit of sewing, but don't fear. I'm going to show you a very simple stitch, and I'll also link a few more detailed tutorials in the description if you need them. We're going to sew up the back of the hood, that angled line you just cut, using a blanket stitch. You could just as well use a sewing machine on this, so if you don't need the sewing tutorial, just skip ahead to this timestamp. Cut off about a yard of thread and feed it through the eye of the needle. Pull it halfway through so that the back ends line up, and knot it a few times so that you get a nice sturdy knot. I just roll it off my fingers so that it tangles up. Start at the top of your seam and push the needle through both layers of fabric, pulling until the knot is flush. Go back in from the same side just about 1/8 of an inch further down, and pull the thread through until you have a little loop like this. Thread the needle through that loop and pull until the stitch locks in. Repeat this process until you reach the end of the seam, or you run out of thread and have to start again. I really like a blanket stitch for this project because it's very sturdy and it locks the edges of the fabric in. To tie it off at the end of your seam or when you run out of thread, either make a few knots close to the fabric or loop your thread through multiple times in the same spot until your seam won't go anywhere. Once the stitching is complete, invert the hood so that the seam is hidden. Now onto the body. To determine the placement of your neck hole, we're gonna fold over our rectangle. For simplicity's sake, you could just fold it in half, but I want mine to hang down further in the back than the front, so I'm only gonna fold over 30 inches. Fold it the other way, and this corner that was once the center of our rectangle will be our neck hole. Find a bowl, plate, or other round object that has the same circumference as that neck hole measurement and trace it out onto a piece of paper. Cut out that circle and fold it into quarters. Place this template on the corner of your fabric, cut it out, and ta-da! When you open it, you have a perfect circle. Unfold your fabric and refold so that you can cut a line down the center front of the cloak. Now all we have to do is attach the hood. Pinning it onto the neck hole like this can make this a lot easier, but if you don't have pins, just make sure you line up the center back of the neck hole with the center back of the hood seam. Stitch it on with a machine or with that blanket stitch from earlier. My hood didn't quite reach to the front of the neck hole, probably due to stretching, but because we matched up those two center backs, it's even on both sides. At this point, your cloak is finished. Your options for securing it at the front are pretty much endless. You could use a pin, or you could stitch pieces of string to either side and use a very simple knot. If you really wanted to get fancy, there's lots of different closures at craft and fabric stores like Frogs or Hooks and Eyes. And there you have it. In an afternoon, you can fulfill all of your hobbity dreams. I love the dimension that this wool fabric gives, as well as the weight of it. This cloak is super versatile. You can leave it hanging in front of you if you're trying to keep warm, or simply toss it back over your shoulders if you wanted to show off your outfit. Cloaks have been a fashion staple since prehistoric times, and they're one of the most simple and versatile garments. They were part of the uniforms of Roman soldiers and were daily outerwear in the Victorian era. Unfortunately, with the Industrial Revolution came the automation of sewing, and tailored coats became much more widely available. While I do love a good coat, it seems a shame that they've cornered the outerwear market since cloaks are so simple, fashionable, and versatile. Cloaks seem to have become something that you wear as a costume, but I'm here to let you know that there's nothing that makes a costume different from any other clothing. If you want to wear a cloak to work simply because it's foggy out and you want to feel like a woodland adventurer, wear that cloak. If you think a sparkly witch hat would really pull the look together, put it on. Do you have a formal gown that you wore once? Don't let that thing rot away in your closet. Pair it with your swankiest lobster pin and head out to your local bar. Once I stopped letting what I thought other people would think about what I was wearing govern the things I wore, I got a lot happier and started looking a lot cooler. I hope you all enjoyed this video and that it helped you gear up for whatever adventures you're going on. If you follow this tutorial, I'd love to see what you come up with, so feel free to shoot me a picture on Instagram. Like this video if you thought it was interesting, and subscribe if you'd like to see more of my content. Thank you all so much for joining me, and I hope that you all have a very happy Hobbity day.